Welcome to Software Leaders Uncensored with Steve Taplin. Welcome to Software Leaders Uncensored, where tech leaders drop the filters and just tell it like it is. I'm your host, Steve Taplin, serial tech entrepreneur. I have 30 companies under my belt, 20 of which failed, and 10 I've scaled to big successes. And that roller coaster of a ride is my new book, Fail Hard, Win Big. And this is my story of how to use failure as a superpower and the power of custom software development and what it does for your company, your client experience, and your enterprise value. Now I'm the CEO of Sonatify Technology. We are a nearshore software development company. We help scale existing engineering teams. And today we are joined by Daniel Sachs, who is the CEO and co-founder of Landbase. Daniel has been an advisor. He's a Forbes contributor. He's co-founded multiple companies, board member. Daniel, excited to have you.
Thrilled to be here.
If you would, take our listeners through a few-minute overview of the journey of your career.
So I grew up in Niagara Falls, Canada, in a family business that had a furniture store on Main Street and that was started by my great-great-grandparents. And after 100 years in business, at the height of the Great Recession, just as I was graduating, the furniture store had to close down. And I always grew up knowing the pride that entrepreneurship brings to a family, both for providing food on the table as well as an identity. And the fate of many businesses around the time I was graduating were all in shambles. It wasn't just my family's furniture store. It was the local butcher and the bookstore and the sports store all closed down. And I had a view that the future of entrepreneurship could really look bleak. And it might just be that we're taken over by big box stores like Walmart and others. But I flew to San Francisco and learned about cloud in its early days and was blown away with what was happening in Silicon Valley. And this phase between 2011, there were one or two really cool SaaS companies, all in their series seed or A. So you had Dropbox and Box, you had DocuSign and EcoSign, you had Shopify and BigCommerce. And essentially this was on one hand, the entrepreneurial ecosystem was dying. On the other hand, you had these tools that totally could have essentially accelerated my family's business. And the kind of paradigm shift that we had, me and my co-founder, was what if we could bring all these emerging tools to businesses around the world? And I remembered from my family experience that selling software is all about trust. And in order to buy stuff, you need someone, most businesses aren't just going to go online and subscribe to software. It was about building a network of trust. So we founded AppDirect to build the platform that helps businesses find, buy, and use software. And we partnered with trusted local providers in countries around the world. This could be big box stores like Staples. This could be the telecoms like AT&T and Comcast. This could be small local VARs or MSPs. Fast forward to today, AppDirect is the largest commerce platform for selling recurring technology. We last disclosed gross merchandise value over $3 billion in tech sales a year, selling services like Microsoft 365, AWS, CrowdStrike, and really servicing millions of businesses and helping them thrive through access to technology. And I think a lot of my success was predicated on luck of landing in Silicon Valley in 2009 when SaaS was emerging. And I always promised myself, if there was another tectonic shift, like there was from on-prem to cloud, I would want to capitalize on that. And when AI and the ChatGPT moment emerged, I saw a next step with agentic AI that could be even more impactful. And I also wanted to solve the biggest problem that I see businesses face, which is generating business and starting to grow. So we founded Landbase to help businesses find their next business customer and ultimately execute sales and marketing campaigns that can help them grow.
I love it. So you come from a generational entrepreneurship family. And although it had a devastating end, you looked at why it ended, what could have been done, and you created companies around it. I love it.
Thanks.
Daniel, great story. Tell us about Landbase. What do you guys do?
Landbase was designed to help businesses find their next customer and ultimately help them run sales and marketing campaigns in minutes, not months. And the technology premise is that as language models were evolving, language models are good at understanding natural language and are trained on a public library of information that's available online. But if you want to be really good at sales and marketing campaigns, you actually have to go far deeper to understand what drives the performance outcome of campaigns and what's specific about a buyer and seller that can unlock the value. So where language models exist, we trained the first domain-specific model for go-to-market, and we fed it 600 million contacts. 22 million businesses, 40 million plus performance campaigns. And what we did is built specialized models instead of generalized language models that can help optimize the outcome of these performance campaigns. And our models are really grouped into a few different components. The first is a reward model to help understand and score the success. That reward model is built on something that we call reinforcement learning with human performance feedback. So if you have gone deep, and I know in your podcast, you sometimes go really deep, we take the approach to reinforcement learning, but then we apply real human performance data to help label our reinforcement, which drives outcomes in the performance modeling. We also go deep around content generation, but specifically to understand the buyer and the seller. And then we also really think about how we can automate these experiences through deeper data signals and constant iteration in our models.
That's a massive, massive area and challenge to solve. And of my 30 companies that I've had, I learned very early that I was really good at selling, but I had no idea how to market. And I had to immerse myself in everything marketing from then, which led to me starting my own marketing companies. There's so much data, so I understand this space well. Tell me how your clients use this system to accelerate their go-to-market expert.
So we believe in a world where you should no longer work for your software, but your software should work for you. And that's the dream made possible by agentic AI. And in that philosophy, we believe that humans should have agency over the decisions, meaning that really the key thing that's going to build a business or a brand is the decisions that the humans take. However, there's a lot of manual repetitive processes, a lot of siloed teams that go into sales and marketing. There's a lot of fragmented data. And if we can pull all of that together to serve up actions that a human can take, it can dramatically accelerate the speed at which you launch campaigns. It can reduce the cost for software, data, and humans. And it can also drive better performance outcomes. So with our models and reward modeling, we actually see a 4 to 7x performance uplift on campaigns because our AI and machine intelligence can essentially help score a campaign and allow the human to end up executing campaigns that are most likely to succeed.
I love it. And it's well put. And, with the rise of AI and the rapid evolution to it, it's not a tool to replace anyone. It's a tool to make people more productive on the mundane task, on the research task. Who's your typical client for Landbase? Do you have industry focuses? Do you have specific business focuses?
We're focusing on B2B clients that operate in traditional business sectors as well as software. So you could think of a managed service provider that wants to go to market. It could be an insurance brokerage firm. It could be a industrial manufacturing company or a medical device company. What we found when you analyze all these different professions is that a lot of their business was built off referral, or if they did use technology, it was often something like really basic, or they outsourced to agency. And my entrepreneurial roots really kind of fell in love with this problem where I would travel to businesses all around the world. And most businesses would never have the first clue of what an Apollo or Clay is or what Common Room is. And a lot of the top sellers, like I can see in you, I can see you must be this natural born seller, haven't needed to necessarily adopt technology or traditional SaaS because it would take them away from what they do best, which is being in front of people. But my belief with agentic AI is that it's totally different than traditional software, where traditional software sucked your time and required you to sit in front of a screen and crunch over and take all your time. Whereas I think that agentic AI can actually free up your time by giving you machine intelligence on the go, giving you the tools to be faster, smarter, better. But ultimately, you can still do more of what you love, which might be golfing with clients, which I know both of us don't do as much, but it could be pickleball. It could be, going out drinking. But I actually think that the world of sales and marketing in the future is going to look a lot more like it did 20 years ago than it does today. And that's because anything that I think is done on a digital domain right now in front of a screen can probably be automated with machine intelligence better. But what can't be replicated is the human elements of trust and these in-person relationships.
So I have to ask, and a lot of our listeners might not be familiar with tools like Common Room and Clay. Clay is the ultimate marketing enrichment tool to get data, enrich it, from contact info to intent to everything else. And Common Room pulls in signals, marketing rev ups type tools. So how does Landbase differ or use those, or
Our
tell me
belief
more?
Our belief is that they're great tools, but they require a high level of cost and sophistication to deploy. So there's actually a title called GTM engineer that's emerged for someone who needs to orchestrate these tools. And that works great if you're a big technical, sophisticated tech company, but it definitely does not work well if you are not used to a go-to-market stack. At AppDirect, we built a team of hundreds of sellers, or probably 100 sellers on our team, but then we had thousands of sellers that we enabled. And the cost to deploy technology, data, and systems to them was very high. And every year you need to layer on more systems to make the systems work. You need to layer on more people. Then titles emerge for a RevOps manager and a go-to-market engineer. And before you know it, you have this team of millions of cost of technology, millions of cost of labor. The problem that we wanted to solve is how do we actually take that sophistication that someone would put together and how do we distill it into something that any seller can use, starting for a really low cost and just get the value.
I love it. And look, I run a software development company. I have over 100 engineers, and that go-to-market engineer type role that you mentioned is a big thing that is getting more and more complex. And so awesome. Offline, I need to learn more. I love what you're doing there. Tell us about some current tech projects you're working on.
So one of the big trends that I see evolving in AI is what I call vibe AI. So a lot of your listeners may have heard of vibe coding, which was coined by the co-founder of OpenAI, which was a term for some of these new companies, particularly IDEs like Lovable, Cursor, Bolt, that you can chat with it in natural language and it can code websites, apps for you. And what that has done is democratized the whole trade of engineering so someone non-technical can build creatively what they want. And these are some of the fastest growing companies of all time. Lovable just announced 100 million raise, which makes it one of the fastest growing tech companies of all time.
It is one of the best tools I've seen for putting prototypes together.
I love it. But what my belief is that this vibe experience of being able to chat in natural language, view something, and then iterate and interact with it will apply to the most effective AI native companies. So Landbase is pioneering Vibe AI for go-to-market, and we call it Vibe GTM. But it's the idea that any non-technical seller and marketer, so you don't need to have a PhD in sales, you don't need to be a GTM engineer, you can just chat with our AI in natural language, and we can suggest high-performing campaigns based on our model's intelligence of you, who you're targeting, and all the best strategies in order to optimize your go-to-market.
Awesome. Love it. Talk to us about your engineering team. How many do you have? How does your company manage it? Are you hybrid, remote, on site?
So the key to me in differentiating, I always believe in building a company that has the potential to be the category leader. And for me in this business, I want it to have the potential to be a $100 billion business someday. So when I bring it back to first principles, the key secret sauce for us is our AI lab, which is led by our chief data scientist and co-founder, Gao. I like to call the godfather of GTM AI. So he was a Stanford PhD in neural networks. When his peers were going to DeepMind and some of the other language models, he co-founded a company called Everstring, which was one of the first machine intelligence companies that got bought by ZoomInfo. And he joined me to co-found Landbase to really build out technical transformer-based models that can outperform other approaches. And our AI lab is where like the secret sauce is done. And then we build products on top of our AI lab and our intelligence. So for us, a lot of our technologies are around how do we quick adopt language models? What type of transformer-based architecture do we need to evolve on top of? Now that we're building in these vibe interfaces, we do a lot around thinking about how to adjust our system prompts. We're thinking a lot about speed of performance. So, vector databases. We're thinking a lot about how we can make the chat be most multi-agent and natural. So we're using temporal. So that's a lot of what's happening in our AI lab. And then on top of that, we're building interfaces, which is really this vibe experience where we need to really redefine in order to operate at high speed what the experience is and how you interact with others. So on the front end, we're exploring things with like vibe design, where we actually, instead of manually building out mocks and Figma, we vibe code things. We then have processes to tie our design systems to the vibe coding. We do need to have like a manual hardening process, and sometimes we do revert back to Figma. But my hypothesis is within the, let's say months or to the end of the year, we could vibe code or vibe design using vibe coding tools, our design, translate that into design tokens and design systems, and maybe do some hardening on the back end. But we think we could have this whole code factory where 80% plus of our code could be written by CodeGen. And those are the kind of things that we're innovating on, which is how do we build at high speed and high velocity using frameworks that can automate a lot of what we do.
So your AI lab, is that in an office, in person? Is that
in person?
remote?
So yeah, in Mountain View, California, we have people from like a Stanford PhDs, NASA data scientists, people from Meta. So really kind of a small team. If you look at a lot of these vibe coding companies, they actually had a very small technical team that were able to scale. So our AI lab is, let's say, 10 to 12 strong. But then we do have an office in Toronto to scale out our go-to-market and our front end and back end. But yeah, in person.
Gotcha. Now in Toronto, is that in person as well, or is that remote?
We are just announcing a new office opening in a couple of weeks.
So for your engineering teams, so do you believe they need to be on site? What's your company philosophy there?
Our philosophy is it's better to be digital first. So like Toby from Shopify, right? So ultimately his approach is that everyone's digital, but you also can have offices to work in because human collaboration is better. So in a perfect world, I would have everyone in one office and in person. But I think the reality is you can tap talent from different markets. There's advantages to have different talent pools. Because me and my co-founding team have built really businesses at scale, we do have access to talent in different places. So we're not 100% restrictive around you have to be in Mountain View or you have to be in Toronto. We do have teams elsewhere. But our ultimate view is if we can hire the best in the locations in which we operate, that's preferred. And if we can't, we'll take the best talent where we can and operate digitally, regardless of if you're in person or not.
Gotcha. No, makes sense. As a tech CEO, what's the biggest challenge you're facing right now?
The speed at which technology is evolving and competition is emerging. So as I said, again, like I'm in it to win it and make something really big, category leader. But I probably launched a business in one of the most crowded categories of all time. So if you're tracking the go-to-market tech landscape, there's literally thousands of companies that have emerged in the last couple of years. There's probably hundreds that are well-funded. And it makes it hard. Going back to when I started in technology in 2009, there was maybe one or two well-funded category leaders in each category. Box and Dropbox and DocuSign and Ecosysms. And actually in 2009, when I started, one of the first things I did is create a list of the top 100 SaaS companies based on a certain criteria. And I nailed that list. Like today, the aggregate market value of that list would be, trillion plus. It would include Shopify and Cloudflare and Dropbox Box and many others. But today, if I were to, I attempted with agentic AI to create that same list, and it's just like so many companies, so hard to break through the mold, so hard to identify. So I definitely say that the speed at which disintermediation could occur, right? There's definitely a true fear that if the AI labs reach super intelligence, is all of technology, disintermediated? So that's a big fear. And then just the speed of companies competing. But I feel like if you always pull it back to first principles, you don't follow like a textbook, but you just think like, what is it that's going to make me the category leader? And you have a clear sense of your moats and differentiation. I still feel like we're very well positioned to be the category leader in AI GTM and build a $100 billion business.
Well, I'll make the comment that I agree. There are a lot of companies out there, but it's hard to find good ones. So you're in a good space that's looking for good leaders, to say the least.
I do want to spend a minute on, your philosophy just around failure, because ultimately I've created two fast growing large businesses, but behind the hood, it's all about the speed at which you fail. And when people ever ask me what my favorite books are, I would say like The Hard Thing About Hard Things by Ben Horowitz, who uncovered behind the scenes that like messy, right? A lot of problems. Uri Levine, his book around Fall in Love with the Problems, Not the Solution. And one of my friends, Jeremy Bloom, who was an athlete in the NFL in the Olympics and then started Integrate. And his book was Fueled by Failure. But I love your book and the premise just around the faster you fail, the faster you are to success. And I think that on the outside, all these stories look so easy. And we just raised a 30 million Series A led by top VCs. And, I get all these congratulations and high fives and wow, this is so great. It's like, you have this wisdom or whatever. But I mean, on the inside, I'm like, when you raise money, the bar is higher. It's harder.
Yes.
You have more pressure and you just have to fuel with more problems and more failure. And, on the technical side, what I would say is we've pretty much had to rebuild our platform 3 times in a year and a half. Like, it's pretty wild, the rate at which we're scaling, but the rate at which we need to quick adopt and be agile. So just it really resonates with me, your core premise.
No, and thank you. And unfortunately, I wish you learned as much from your successes as you do your failures, but that's not how it works. And your ability to use those failures as fuel to minimize it happening again. Think of new ideas, think of new niches. That's what I have seen is the difference between the ones who make it and the ones who don't, to say the least. So that's interesting that you guys, and it doesn't surprise me with my understanding of the go-to-market space and the players out there that you've had to rebuild your platform multiple times in just, an 18-month period, because everything's changing so rapidly that you got to adapt or die.
Exactly. But I think it's never been a more exciting time. I mean, when we started, 100% of our code was written by humans. And now it's probably closer to 50%. And like I said, by the end of the year, I think it could be 80%. That's a major shift. What I would say is, like, we internally created something that we called the AI Factory, which is the goal of essentially automating everything that we do via AI. And each department has certain goals to achieve around this level of automation. And our values actually are own it, automate it, and elevate it in that specific order. So we want someone to build something, feel ownership over it. Then we want them to identify ways to automate that more effectively using AI. And then elevate it is to really delight people with magical experiences, whether that's an internal, stakeholder or whether that's a customer. But this whole concept of the AI Factory has put us at the forefront of not being able to be afraid to disintermediate even something that we created a few months ago. An example of this, we created, so first we built out our models in our AI lab and it took time to train. Then we created kind of products which were more sales led. And we launched last September. By most standards, we scaled to one of the fastest growing, at least in the SaaS era, we would have outpaced any SaaS growth within a 9-month period, hence the 30 million Series A and having a great ARR trajectory. But what we wanted to do to take it to the next level is democratize that sales-led motion, which was like a $3,000 monthly price, to something that people could use on just a credit system. And we sought to build a PLG experience or product-led experience for what we're building. And this was what I call Vibe GTM, inspired by Vibe coding. And we endeavored to do this in a 6-week period. So by the time we kind of knew we were close to closing the funding to the time that we wanted to announce our funding, it's 6 weeks to sprint to take something that we had that was sales led, pull it down to be PLG. And it was like a gargantuan task. But because we used CodeGen and because we used automation and because we had our AI lab, we could speed to do that. We sprinted to do it. The day before launch and Series A announcement, we had about 15 pretty core blockers that we could have made the call to say, let's just stop. But we pushed through, we persevered, we addressed 13 out of the 15. In the last 6 weeks since being live with this, we've seen exponential engagement on our website. So we turned what would have been a static website with a contact form into this live interactive experience where we get real feedback from clients. But what we realize is that we're still failing on a lot of the coverage use cases. So we allow anyone to say, tell us who you want to find as the next customer and what do you want to sell? And our machine intelligence can identify who they are, who they want to sell to, and the campaigns that they should execute to sell. And it's incredible to see that we're literally taking what would have taken years or months and hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars to do and bringing it down into like a free instant experience. But our failure rate is actually fairly high. And if you look at a lot of the vibe coding players or a Perplexity, it was the same thing. It's how do you take a one-shot prompt that may have a high failure rate and create more clear ways for the community to essentially be more effective at prompting to get the result they want. So in the last 6 weeks, what we've been doing is figuring out, like analyzing every failure case, first with AI, then with manual intervention, and then really just trying to get, improved success rates on this first one-shot prompt. As we've been doing this, we found that people in our community have actually figured out how to game our system in a multi-shot prompting way to actually achieve the objectives they have. So it's pretty wild. But what we found is that our biggest restriction was not our AI model's intelligence or ability on temporal to recreate a multi-agent system that can improve the success. It's actually that we have limitations on our front end. So right now, we're endeavoring to do something in like 30 days or less, which is re-architect our entire front end to be composable, so we don't need to manually update fields in the front end to achieve broader outcomes that our users want. So that's an example where in a less than 3 month period, we rolled out a product, we identified the failure. The failures are coming in every day. I mean, honestly, it's a lot of failure, but we're seeing that success cases are going up and up and up. Now, if we get to an 80% success rate, which we believe we can, within, let's say, another 45 days, the outcomes will be insane. We always put the promise to our customers: faster, better, and cheaper. But it will really transform the market, just like the Vibe AI players did.
Now, a question for you, but your AI factory, where do you draw the line of they're focusing on your internal teams versus client issues?
Good question, and that's always the trade-off. One of my favorite books is Amp It Up by Frank Suitman. So he was the CEO of Snowflake, and really kind of narrows in on how focus is really the key driver of a business. And I always say, like, my biggest weakness is staying focused, because I want to build big, broad, impactful businesses. I call it like a compound startup. So Parker Conrad from Rippling pioneered this, but instead of saying like, I'm going to build just one thing for one person, it's like, I'm going to actually combine, in his case, IT, HR, and procurement, and that can create like 10, 100x value. And so I think like what I always think about is, how do you create, while wanting to do a lot, how do you create a North Star so your teams can be decentralized and make calls on the ground to stay focused? The way I always do that is with key metrics. So our number one metric is the interested replies per customer per month. And our engineering teams and our teams are all self-prioritizing based on this North Star metric. And that's really how we align the teams to make decisions across the AI factory.
Amazing. Daniel, thank you so much for getting uncensored with us today. You are a dynamic leader that I love your approach to solving challenges, creating companies to do that. You have a very rare combo of both vision and execution. Congrats on what you've built, what you're going to continue to build. Before we wrap, give one piece of no BS advice for tech leaders, for founders out there in the tech space. As a guy who's done a lot, raised money, built some big companies, what advice do you have for others out there?
Ultimately, have conviction in your vision and don't be afraid to fail to get to that vision.
Love it. Daniel, thank you so much. That's it for this episode of Software Leaders Uncensored. I'm Steve Taplin. If you like the show, please go ahead and hit subscribe. Well, if you didn't like it, well, kiss my butt. Daniel and I are going to come after you, or even worse, we're going to tell your competitors about it to give them the edge. So remember to fail hard to win big, and make sure you build what matters. See you next time, everyone. That's a wrap. Another great episode of Software Leaders Uncensored. Thank you guys so much for listening. I really appreciate it. It's a lot of fun doing this show. I love talking with great tech leaders. As a side note, if you're interested, check out my new book, Fail Hard, Win Big. This is the story of how I built 30 companies, failed on 20, and turned 10 into multi-million-dollar wins. The common thread with all of them was custom software. Also, if you need software development help out there, my company, Sonatify Technology, we deliver world-class software development engineers out of Latin America. We have a solid track record of helping companies launch better products and faster. Thanks again for listening. Appreciate it and appreciate you.